Nowadays, the title of Dark Lord of the Sith is sort of thrown around to anyone who is considered to be a Sith Lord. But long ago, in the ancient days of the Sith Empire, the term Dark Lord came with a gravitas, and there was a special mark to prove it. Greetings again, Lore Junkies, and welcome back to the archives. The Rule of Two reorganized a lot of the things about the Sith, most of them for the better, but the Dark Lord title became somewhat of a trivialized term to just meaning the current Sith Master. Of course, the Dark Lord is for the one who is in charge of all of the Sith of the time, and if there are only two Sith at a time, then the Master will always be the Dark Lord. That was until the era of Vader and Sidious, when both of them wore that title together, and after them, it sort of lost all meaning. But Dark Lord once meant so much more than being the evil counterpart of the Grand Master. It came with notions of regality, sovereignty, and even deification. And the Dark Lords of the old proved this with a special tattoo that they adorned on their foreheads. In today's Holocron, we are going to dive into the Mark of the Dark Lord, a long-forgotten tradition of the Sith. We'll be discussing what the mark means and why it went extinct, along with the two humans that were the last to wear it. My friends, there are many of these kinds of lore questions left unexplored, but we have made it our mission to discuss what's been overlooked and forgotten. If that is something that piques your scholarly interest, then consider liking the video and force crushing that subscribe button. Then you shall wear the mask of a lore junkie and be notified when we upload our many holocrons. Now, the archives are open, and let us begin. The significance of the mark lies within the importance of the title that it represents. The title of Dark Lord has changed its meaning over the eons of the Sith Order, but in the beginning, it was the evolution of the Sith King title. Before the time of Ajunta Pall, the Sith Lords were a race of red-toned beings who were simply known as purebloods. They were native to the planet of Korriban, yet they had an empire that spread out to many worlds around them. They were a feudal, tribalistic people who admired nothing but strength and warfare. The dark side of the Force flowed through them better than their own blood did, forcing them to worship dominion and power. To the pure-blooded Sith, war was the natural state of things, as normal as peacetime was to any other species. And because of this, they had no ruler. No one was strong enough to tame this flame. Not until what is known as the Reign of the Axe. Born with flesh of charcoal black, King Adis would change everything from the moment that he was conceived. The Kasai priests blessed him and announced that he was destined for greatness. He stood head and shoulders above every other Sith pureblood and wielded force-imbued axes in each hand. Axes that typically required even the strongest Sith to wield one with two hands. He conquered every land on Korriban and was the first to unite every Sith banner and tribe into a single unified kingdom. He was so revered that he begat the legend of the Sith Ari, the perfect being destined to bring the Sith to a new evolution and a new power. And when the king died, the prophecy of the Sith Ari lived on. But while no one was able to claim that legend, they could claim the throne. Many Sith kings lived after King Adis, each one proving to be the strongest or the most clever of their kind. Many made groundbreaking discoveries in the dark side, giving birth to advanced dark alchemy and reality-bending magical spells. And throughout the eras, the Sith pureblood race was forever changed by the instatement of a king who would rule over them all. The reason we went on this tangent is so that you can understand just how monumental it was when Ajunta Pall and the other 11 Dark Jedi made them all look pathetic. Following the 100-year darkness, the 12 Dark Jedi were banished to wild space and emerged on the planet of Korriban. Stepping out of their ship, they were greeted by the Sith pure-blooded race, who they sensed immediately had a strange potency in the dark side. In a matter of weeks, the Dark Jedi learned the Sith's language and culture, and then they undermined it. Ajunta Pall publicly tortured and beheaded the king Hakagam Grosh with his own sword, and then thereafter took his place as the ruler of the Sith race. But the priests were dazzled by their power. Since they were all former Jedi, their command of the Force was refined and controlled, rather than that of the Sith who harness it more in its raw form. Only the kings and the priests to some extent exhibited a refined form of the dark side, that being what they knew as alchemy and magic. But the Dark Jedi ran roughshod over what they considered to be power and stomped it into the sands of Korriban. Calling them kings was simply not enough. To the Sith purebloods, they were gods in the flesh, and so they considered Ajunta Pall to be the greatest of them, and so he was dubbed the Gen Ari, the Dark Lord. You see, the Dark Lord of the Sith was not simply a ruler or even a deity, but the chief of gods. Unfortunately though, we don't have any records of Ajunta taking on the mark on his forehead. Almost everything we know about the Dark Jedi's arrival and subjugation of Korriban comes from the journals of Source's Sin. Had Pall taken on this special tattoo, that seems like something that Source's Sin would have noted, so we have to assume that this tradition began at some point during the Silent Centuries between 6900 and 5000 BBY. Our first theory is that, following the death of the first 12 Dark Jedi, many Sith attempted to rise up and claim the title of Dark Lord. This would undoubtedly have caused havoc and a devastating war. So, the Kasai priests probably began the tradition of marking the Dark Lord with a special tattoo. That way, none could lay claim to it besides the one voted in by the Dark Council. This is something that is confirmed to us in Tales of the Jedi Golden Age of the Sith number 4, which is the first time that we actually get to see the mark being administered by the priests. The comic tells us that the tattoo is a badge of power. It is the symbol of the Dark Lord's supremacy. By the time Naga Sadow takes the mantle, this had been a tradition used for a very long time. Marka Ragnos wore it, though we don't see his mark since he always wears a helmet. But once Sadow manipulated his way through the Dark Council, he was elected to the position of the Dark Lord. After this, he underwent a ceremony to make it official. In a private chamber, only 2 priests were present, and Sadow lay flat on some kind of altar or table. But the altar had grips that he holds onto. Unlike many things with the Sith, receiving the mark of the Dark Lord came with a deep price of suffering. The process continues like this. The priests take out a crystalline pyramidal box, and from within, they dump out 2 black arachnids on Sadow's head. These unknown species look like a cross between a beetle and a scorpion, but with 2 tails dripping with venom. They appear to be enchanted by magic, and when they drop onto the head of Sadow, they immediately know what to do. The arachnids work in tandem with 2 of their tails, as they pierce his forehead, administering the searing venom that causes his flesh to smoke. They then draw the mark of the Dark Lord, and immediately following, drop dead on the floor. Naga Sadow foams at the mouth, and convulses in pain as veins of stress etch across his head. But soon, it's over, and the mark of the Dark Lord belongs only to him. Interestingly, it seems that this ceremony is what seals the deal for Sith to become the Dark Lord. Before the ceremony begins, the Kasai priests make a point to call him Naga Sadow when they ask if he is ready for the mark. But immediately after he rises from the altar, they genuflect and refer to him as Dark Lord. If we had to guess, they likely believe this process and the pain it induces serves as a transformation into godhood, as one only gets the name once they have the mark. However, the very last time we see the mark induced, it would not be by this means. A different way would form. In the year 4000 BBY, the Sith Empire had fallen and was no more. Sadow's failure in the Great Hyperspace War had cost them everything, just as the spirit of Marka Ragnos warned that it would. In the future, Exar Kun had become a Sith Lord, turned to the dark side by the ghost of Frida Nad. He conquered what was left of Sadow's forces on Yavin 4, now fancying himself as the Dark Lord. However, he learned that Frida Nad had other students, a cult known as the Krath. What remained of them was a witch by the name of Alima Keto, and a Dark Jedi by the name of Ulic Qel-Droma. Wearing Naga Sadow's Amulet of Power, Exar Kun made his way to the Empress Tita system in order to challenge these new rivals. He and Qel-Droma entered a duel where neither one could best the other, but unbeknownst to them, Ulic Qel-Droma was also wearing a Sith amulet, the sister amulet to Kun's. Their conflict together caused the amulets to glow and connect, which summoned the spirit of Marka Ragnos from beyond the grave yet again. The Spectre commanded them to cease, and announced who he was. Ragnos then decreed that they should be the ones that would bring back the Sith Empire and to reinstate the Golden Age. Then the spirit of Marka Ragnos pressed his thumb to each of their foreheads. Just like with Naga Sadow, it induces a searing, smoking pain that causes both men to double over in agony. But following, they have the seal of the Dark Lord. But this is the first time that 2 marks were ever given at the same time. According to Marka Ragnos, they were both destined to bring back the Sith Empire, and so they both had to wear the seal as the mutual Dark Lords. This was a huge first for Sith history. Not only were humans wearing the mark, but now there were 2. But Ragnos declared that there was still a hierarchy. Kun was the master, and Ulic Qel-Droma was the apprentice. This was perhaps the proto-beginning of the rule of 2. Exar still raised up a brotherhood of Sith, but this was the first time we see the master and apprentice dynamic for the ones in charge. A fascinating evolution indeed, and they both wore the mark and title of Dark Lord, but at different degrees and levels. Because of this, the symbols of Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, they were actually different to the one that Naga Sadow wore, likely because there had to be a differentiation in their marks. These marks were also permanent. Even when Ulic Qel-Droma turned back to the light side, the mark of the Dark Lord remained. After nearly 10 years, the next time we see Ulic, his forehead has horrible scarring where the mark once had been. It seems that in order to rid himself of it, he had to either cut it or burn it off, probably both with his lightsaber. But this was the ending of the mark of the Dark Lords. However, its legacy remained, as the Sith always do. They grew, adapted, and evolved from the past. The symbology of the mark was not lost. As we mentioned briefly earlier, the mark of Sadow and Ulic and Exar were different. Sadow's we can assume to have been the symbol worn by all of the Dark Lords up until that point. This mark lived on to become the emblem of the Sith Order, the black circle with the spiking flames on either side. As for the title, as we had once said, it was trivialized with the rule of 2. But it now becomes clear that it is something else entirely. Both master and apprentice sharing the title of the Dark Lord harkens all the way back to Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, who were the first. It is the purpose of the rule of 2 to bring back the supremacy of the Sith Empire. And because of the mission, they were spiritually taking on the mantle of Exar and Ulic, thereby fulfilling Marka Ragnos' prophecy. So my friends, what are your thoughts? I personally love the traditions of the ancient Sith and wish that we got to see more in the more modern Sith age. The thing is, a lot of these traditions and rituals lived on, but they occur off-screen. I hope one day in the future we get a show or a movie that displays these dark antiquities to show the religious side of the Sith Order. Understanding these things makes the Sith themselves seem more layered, but let us know if you find this as interesting as we do. And until next time, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. May the Force be with you, and have an amazing day.